but now we're going live.
All right, that'll teach me.
And it says we're live, so there it is already. Hello, welcome to Behind the Scenes of AV Rant. It's episode number 662. This is the live recording session. So yeah, you're seeing the behind the scenes stuff here. What does that mean these days? It means you don't get the intro. It means you get this little extra bit at the beginning here. And it means the audio might be cleaned up in the completed video version that typically posts on Thursdays these days. But there is a completed version.
Shouldn't we just skip that now?
Well, I don't know.
Why don't you can't you just play the intro through OBS?
I could, but then I'd have to when I hit
just queue it up,
live and
then you hit live.
No, but then sometimes we need to edit stuff after and I don't
I'm just
want to
saying it would make your life easier, right?
It wouldn't though. It wouldn't make my life easier.
How would it not? You edit in pictures, don't you?
No.
Oh, you don't have to edit.
Pictures. No. Anyway, for people who are looking at the completed thing, it's also got, I haven't mentioned this in a while. It's worth mentioning if these are the only ones you ever watch. In the completed version, in the show description, the text box below the video, I put times in there and a little blurb of each person's question if you want to skip around real quick. So I haven't mentioned that in a while. It's worth doing if you only ever watch the behind the scenes. Let's see. That video's live. That's there. Your audio levels are there. We're recording everything. Is my audio recording? My audio's recording.
I didn't really check.
Okay. I think we're good to go.
Yeah, we're good. Does it say 3 minutes? We've been yapping for 3.
Well, since we started our audio recording, we didn't go live 3 minutes ago.
Okay, shut up. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. Once again, starting later than we thought we would, but it's all good. Tons of questions to answer.
I'm sorry, man. I can't.
There's
always something.
I was gonna update everybody. I'm like, oh, we're running. I'm like, nah, I just ran out of time too. So we start when we start. That's how it goes.
I think Tuesdays at 11 is going to be the new start time. Because I'm planning, at least for the next month maybe month and a half, I will be helping out at my son's school from 8:30 to 9:30. It's like a 20-minute drive home, so I don't see me getting ready by 10 o'clock.
Well, by hook or by crook, we bring you AV Rant every week.
I don't know what that
means. A whole bunch of
Rob pulling another phrase out of
hook or by crook. Times. Come on, you've heard hook or by crook. That is not new.
What is the crook? The bad guy, or crook like the crook of your arm?
It's definitely not like bad guy. Hook or crook.
See, if you don't know what it is,
I'm not exactly sure.
Times.
It is ye olde times. Of course it is.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I just said that you pulled it out of ye olden times.
I mean, a crook is like a cane, isn't it?
I think the top of the hook cane has a crook in it. Yeah, which is the same thing as a hook.
It's not like we're on the internet and could look it up.
We're not looking it up.
Far too difficult.
We are like real people back in the olden days, ye olden days at the ice cream shop parlor, shoppy.
Yep.
Where we would all discuss things as if we had knowledge that we didn't actually have and didn't have supercomputers in our hands in which to look things up on Wikipedia. Mm-hmm. All right, this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there, facebook.com/AVRant podcast, which is a good way to get in touch with us. YouTube.com/AVRant if you would like to look at our videos and not comment on them because we don't want you to.
Yeah, comments are closed. That's the way it goes. Hopefully I'm closer to being in focus this week. I tried. I've been out of focus the past few weeks.
I didn't turn on my don't focus thing.
Yeah.
I might if I move my.
Yours is always fine. Mine is.
There you go. See like that?
Now
I'm out of focus. I'm in focus. I'm out of focus. Whatever. Contact us directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter's at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. I want to thank our listeners of the week. If you become a listener of the week to support the podcast in some way, one of the ways you can do that is financially. Mm-hmm. Go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Sign up for a continuing membership where you will once a month give us money from your account through them to us. I don't know what we get, 70 cents on the dollar, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. So we want to thank our 88 patrons over at patreon.com. Still trying to break that 100 mark. We'll see if we get there or not. And this includes James from the UK. So thank you, James from the UK, and our 87 other patrons.
That is right. That is patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, you sign up once and it just keeps on going. And if you forget about it, we still keep getting money. So yeah, that's good. And thanks to our 88 patrons, including James W. from the UK. Thank you for signing up, James.
We also want to thank, well, if you can't support us financially, figure out something to do and let us know what you did, and we'll mention you. So Byron told us that told SVS and KEF that AV Rant sent him their way for his new PC2000 sub and T101 surround speakers, respectively. And David and Francis both let me specifically, but us in general, know that we had the overlapping promo music or whatever. And I knew that was happening when
yes, on our audio-only versions, if you're...
Yeah, in the audio-only version of the podcast, that we were having some stuff happen, and I'm not fixing it. I mean, I'm going to try to fix it for the future. I'm not going to go back and re-edit those podcasts.
Go back? No, it doesn't affect the show whatsoever.
Yeah. So it was just some overlapping music, which
at the beginning. The very beginning.
The promos. Yeah, we should skip that anyways. But anyways, yeah, I'll try to fix that. I don't know why that's happening. I set it to mute, and it's not supposed to output the mute stuff, but it's not.
It did. And just for anyone who is thinking they don't want to sign up at Patreon for an ongoing, recurring donation thing, if you come to avrant.com, our website, over on the right-hand side, it says support AV Rant, and that'll just take you to PayPal to make a one-time donation. Via PayPal, you don't have to sign up for PayPal either. You can just use a credit card straight through without signing up for anything. So that's another way to support us financially if you want.
Under the radar. Don't let your wife know. My birthday's coming up, if anybody cares. October 5th. That'd be a good day to become a patron.
Or send Tom an Amazon gifty card. Tom at avrant.com.
Philips in the news here. Philips announced their $230 Hue Play HDMI sync box. And Abnu on Twitter wants to hear our take. The Hue Play goes between your HDMI sources and your TV and analyzes the video signal. And if you have color-changing Hue lights, the Hue Play will change the color and the dimming level of your lights to synchronize them with what's being shown on the screen. It will work with signals up to 4K 60, HDR10. But if you're only using an HDR 10 plus or Dolby Vision signal, it will only pass those through. Your Hue lights won't change in response, at least to the HDR 10 or the Dolby Vision signals. The other signals are fine. Philips has offered similar experiences via Ambia Light on Philips brand TVs, as well as the Hue Sync app for Mac and PCs, or special light scripts included with specific movies and games. But now you can have your Hue lights automatically change color and brightness along with almost any video source. It's really not it's dumb.
Oh, it's worse than dumb. I hate this with a burning, fiery passion.
Is your wall behind your thing white, like the same white as your screen, so that whatever color it pops out is actually getting reflected back as the same color? Because if your wall is any color other than the white of the screen, or the exact color of the screen, I suppose, then that color is being color shifted, and therefore you're not seeing that color, which means it's just not doing what it thinks it's doing.
And even if your wall is a perfectly neutral D65 white or gray, this is still biasing your eye. Oh, so your eye, you can sort of think of the receptors in your eyes as photon buckets, and they can be filled. And if you are getting bombarded by more red light or blue light or green light than you actually ought to be, it biases your entire perception of color away from the whatever color it is that you got too many photons of that color. So something on screen, on your actual screen, you're in your actual video, is supposed to look a certain shade of red. But now your Hue lights, because that shade of red is on your TV screen, your Hue lights have also turned to that same shade of red, which actually means what you see on the screen doesn't look red to you anymore. Your eyes have been bombarded by too much red, and your brain compensates for that and shifts everything towards what would be cyan. This is horrible. This is a terrible thing to do. And It pumps the lights, your actual lights that you have installed in your room. It pumps them up and down in their dimming level based on how bright whatever is on screen. So it means you will never see correct colors or contrast if you do this. This is like one of the worst things you could possibly do if you care about accurate. Video.
This is for, in fact, if you are the type of person who wants like D-box seats in your house to
right.
move you around,
right?
This is the solution for you, because what you're looking for is something impressive, but you don't care how it affects the experience.
I hate this so
bias
much.
lighting is the idea behind bias lighting, like real, true, like.
Right.
Just putting a little bit of light behind your screen is
because D65 light behind your screen onto a D65 wall.
If you are in a absolutely black room,
sure.
It can be very fatiguing to have very the image shift from very dark to very, very light very quickly, or just be very bright in your eyes. What this does is it just kind of doesn't let your irises completely open up. Keeps them
proper bias light does.
Keeps them the proper bias light keeps them in a less fatiguing position. All the rest of this is gimmicks that doesn't help you.
Yeah,
so,
this is
actively hurt you, as Rob would.
Horrible disco ball. I hate this so much. Please, if you truly don't care about accurate video whatsoever, okay, knock yourself out. You never cared anyway. You probably have your TV in vivid mode, whatever. But if you're listening to this podcast, most people
when Rob says, just so everybody on this podcast understands, when Rob says you probably have your TV in vivid mode, what he's saying is the Canadian equivalent of you bleepity bleep bleep bleep. You should go to bleep and stay there forever with your bleeping 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 mother. Bleep.
But people here ask us about video calibration and hiring professionals and stuff. And if you're in that kind of mindset, my goodness, is this the last thing you want? Yeah. What you could do with color changing hue bulbs, though, is let's say your walls are not neutral white or gray. They have some color tint to them. You could actually shine the color opposite color from your color changing hue lights, and that will make you perceive your colored walls as neutral gray. I mean, why would you have them painted a color at that point? But you could do that. That's something interesting you could do with your hue lights, but then you would never change it. All right. Soapbox done.
Bleep. All right, so TiVo has decided that what its users really want when they buy a TiVo DVR and pay the monthly fee for TiVo services to have ads inserted before every recorded show when you go to watch them. Like YouTube.
Yeah, very much like YouTube.
Except you get to pay for it. Because when you pay for YouTube...
They take them away?
They take the ads away.
Right.
So you get to pay for it, and you get the ads.
Which you never had before. They're being added. It's a feature.
Don't worry, they say. You can skip the new ads, although on some TiVo models, you have to fast forward instead of outright skip. So TiVo has said that this is now a permanent part of their service. So enjoy, which is basically, we are not making enough money.
Yeah, that is definitely
we need to supplement in some way. So complain about it, and they'll take it away and then go bankrupt, and you'll be screwed.
They could just increase their service charge would be another possibility.
I mean, I would give if it were me and I were TiVo, I would send out an email saying, hey, take our survey. Yeah. We got to do one of these two things.
Right.
We either have to increase it by $1 a month, or we have to insert ads before every recorded show.
Right.
How many of us out there would say, oh, yeah, give me the ads? Some of us would.
Some of us
would. And that would be fine.
Well, who knows? Maybe they will add the option. Maybe it'll be exactly like YouTube. And after these ads have been there for a while, they'll give you the option to pay an extra bit more to take them away
Hulu.
Or something.
Hulu is the basic service has ads, and it's atrocious.
Right.
It is the same ad. Well, maybe it's changed since the time I've experienced, which has been about 5 years since I experienced. No, it's been less than that. So I've experienced Hulu with ads, but it is just brutal to watch. It's brutal to watch the same ad over and over and over again that you can't skip. But so, paying that extra $2 a month or whatever it is so worth it to me. But yeah, no, this is not the way to do this. All right. The CTA, the Customer Technology Association, which is formerly Consumer, what did I say?
Customer.
I don't know why I said that. All right. Consumer Technology Association, which was formerly the CEA, now has an official definition and an official logo for 8K Ultra HD TV displays. It is a money sign.
Could be. Unfortunately, I put the picture up on YouTube before you said that, so I stepped on the joke in video form. But audio-wise, that might have worked.
It's an effort to help consumers identify displays that meet at least a minimum set of specifications when shopping for an 8K display starting in 2020. It's an official 8K Ultra, an official 8K Ultra HD display must have at least 7680 by 4320 active pixels. So almost 8K, like 7.5K.
This is the Ultra HD version of 8K, not the DCI version of 8K.
At least one HDMI input that can accept the resolution at 10 bits up to 60 frames per second with HDR and HDCP 2.2. In other words, a full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 port.
And interestingly, they said nothing about HDCP 2.3. Which does exist. In fact, the newest AV receiver models that came out very recently tout having HDCP 2.3 support. So kind of interesting that to be an official 8K TV, you don't even have to support that new copy protection thing. Huh.
So it's got to have built-in up conversion for standard definition, high definition, and 4K videos, which is, I guess, sure. Specify that. I guess if you didn't specify it, somebody would put out a monitor.
There could be some pro monitor that does no scaling.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And at least 600 nits peak light output. Wow, they really set the bar high on that one.
That's because they know there's going to be 8K. Well, there already are 8K OLEDs, and properly calibrated. They top out about 650 nits or so. Yeah.
All right, let's get to these, I guess, questions.
Mm-hmm.
John has a dedicated theater room that is 12 by 22 by 10 feet. He has a 5.2 set up at the moment with 2 rows of seats. 90% of the time, he sits in the front row, and he's got a Marantz AV 7701 Pre-Pro, which is a processor, and a 7-channel amp. He's only using 5 of those channels right now. And at the moment, his surround speakers are Dyne Audio IW17 in walls mounted high in his back wall. So that's his surround speakers, high in his back wall. And they are very high.
Yeah,
they are
they're on his back wall, pretty close to the rear corners, so they're spread apart, but they're high up close to his ceiling.
His room is acoustically treated, and his dual cylinder subs are at the midpoints of his side walls. So now he's thinking he might like to upgrade to Atmos. All right. He already owns 6 more in-wall speakers. Wow. Okay. He's got another pair of Dyne Audio, the in-wall ones, and he's got 2 pairs of IP17s, which are a little bit larger and higher up the Dyne Audio line. So initially he was thinking he would install the larger ones as new side surrounds and surround backs, and then put the 2 pairs of the in-wall 17s as his ceiling in his ceilings for Atmos. But he keeps hearing Tom say he doesn't like surround backs, so should he install 2 pairs of side surrounds wired in series instead? Well, I mean, don't go by me.
You're just the host of a podcast that answers questions. Don't go
I
by
know. Okay. So, I mean, the reality is that in my situation has always been that my rear surrounds have either been non-optimally placed. Mine are optimally placed if you like THX placement.
Sure.
Which is basically close together at the back of the wall, and that's because I have a door on my back wall that I have to work around. So I don't say that I hate surround backs. I in a room where you are sitting far enough away from them, I think they can make a big difference.
And if he's 90% of the time sitting in his second row, or in his front row, you are far enough away from your back wall that surround back speakers make sense in here. Yeah.
They do. So he's got 2 basically recliners sitting right next to each other for his front row, and he's got a 3-seat row in the back. I can't tell if it's right on the back wall, but it's awfully close to the back wall.
I mean, it's a little bit off because it's in front of those diffusion panels, but it's close to the second row is close to the back wall, but that is by far most of the time not where he is sitting. Right.
So so he wants to know where he should install these speakers. Now, I don't really necessarily. I mean, if 90% with the 10% of the time is when you have guests over and the guests are sitting in the front rows so that they can get the best audio experience, and you're sitting in the back row and you don't care about you're letting them have it.
Maybe.
Well, to me, I mean, if that's what the case is, then I wouldn't worry about installing a second row of side surrounds, a second set of side surrounds, just for that back row for that 10% of the time.
Agreed. I mean, I would put in. I mean, I would definitely put in some side surrounds. I would use the slightly larger, slightly higher up the lineup IP17s as certainly at least one of the pair. He has 2 pairs of those. One of the pairs is your side surrounds. Now, I mean, even without moving his acoustic panels on his sidewall, it looks like he's got a gap. I mean, basically right above where his cylinder subs are. Which would put those side surrounds a little ways behind your front row and a little ways in front of your back row, but that's okay. We're not going to stress too much about the back row that you personally hardly ever sit in. So, I mean, that's where I would put those. Now, the only question is, I would have you still have surround backs. Do you just continue using the ones that you already have, which are too high up and too far apart? I mean, if you're going by, strict things.
Well, he's got these 4 diffusion panels in the back, and they're spaced in such a way that you kind of look at them, you think, the ones that are the widest, if you put the speaker between the ones that are widest and the 2 inside ones, and you put it right there, that seems to make sense.
And a little lower down so that they're not, right up close to your ceiling.
Oh, yeah. I'd put them about at the midpoint of those diffusers, just to make sure you had line of sight from the tweeter to the
clearing
front row
the back of that 3-seater couch. But and again, since you have 2 pairs of the higher end ones, I'd probably use the higher end ones as my, quote unquote floor level around me. And I guess you're patching some holes for the ones that are already there, unless, well, the very next question.
Yeah. So the only thing I would worry about there is with in-wall speakers is that these diffusion panels look fairly thick, like maybe up.
Oh, yeah. They're
6
pretty
inches.
deep. I think those are the 8-inch deep ones going on there.
So I would worry about reflection off the sides of those things if you're going to put them smack in the middle there.
But these are surround backs firing forward.
Yeah, so they shouldn't be a huge issue, but it does. I mean, that's. I might just put a little bit of absorption right there to the sides of that, just a little something
on the
to catch
edges of your diffusion panels.
Right. Yeah, right there. I would put something there. All right. His next question: should he keep the in-wall 17s where they are high up on the back wall and just call them rear heights, or would it make sense to put the other pair of in-wall 17s high up on the front wall as front heights? You could. I wouldn't. I don't. I think they're too close to the surround backs now. I would place them optimally for my front row of seats, which means 10 feet high ceilings, probably 5 or 6 feet in front and 5 or 6 feet behind where your head is.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement that, I mean, you could call them rear heights. You could put speakers high up on your front wall and call them front heights. But if you're able to, I believe you'll get a better experience by actually having them in your ceiling. And
if you think I don't like surround backs, you should talk to me about my front height speakers.
Right.
And how much I think they do. So
believe me, I'm in agreement. I'd go for putting them in your ceiling if you can. And I mean, 5 feet in front, 5 feet behind works pretty darn well in almost any setup. So complete agreement.
All right, Joel. A while back, Joel wrote us about one of his Paradigm monitor speakers had a tweeter that was making a sound, but that was noticeably quieter than the rest. At the time, he was saying how he wanted a speaker upgrade anyway. He had found a great deal on some Paradigm Studio Series speakers, so he thought he was all set to replace the speakers. But it turned out that the Studio Series speakers that were for sale had some damage, so that didn't work out. Then his Paradigm Sub 12 stopped working, and he was thinking he needed to find a whole new setup. When we discussed his previous question, though, we thought how his quiet tweeter might just be a loose wire or some corrosion. Was I here for that? I feel like I was here for that.
Yep, pretty sure you were.
So it turns out we were right. It was both, actually. One loose connection to the driver and one corroded wire inside. He got that all fixed. Now his Paradigm monitor speaker's back to sounding normal. That made him examine his Sub 12 subwoofer, and it had a wire going between the voice coil and the cone that was blown somehow. That's terrifying. If I could just throw that out there as being true. Wow, dodged a exploding fireball bullet on that one. Holy moly, how do you blow a wire out? Jeez. But with that repaired, his sub is working again too. I would put a smoke detector right above that bad boy, just in case.
At least your whole voice coil didn't melt. That's a plus.
Hey, better the wire.
Yeah, wire's easily replaced. Voice coil, that's pretty much the whole driver being replaced.
I've never even heard of that happening.
Yeah, that must have been
some
corroded.
Sort of surge.
Yeah, some sort of surge, but it also must have been corroded because the wire connecting it is usually considerably thicker than the teeny wire that is wound a gazillion times in the voice coil, and that's usually the thing that blows if it's just a heat thing. So, yeah.
So we had the subwoofer wire fixed at a local repair shop in Puerto Rico. They said it might have been an electrical surge, so they recommended an Audio Quest Power Quest 3. Only $7 bajillion.
Probably.
For a surge protector you could get at Walmart for $3. That they said has high current outlets for an amplifier or a subwoofer. Is that a good recommendation that you should buy? He just had a subwoofer and receiver plugged straight into the wall until now. I don't think it was a surge. I think that there's a lot of other things that would have happened to that sub before a surge would have gotten it. I disagree with them completely. There's a fuse, I guarantee you, somewhere in the amplifier that would have broken
if it were a surge
long before this wire would have gone out. So I am no electrical expert, but whoever you took it to is also either not an electrical expert or just trying to sell you a surge protector.
I think they're mostly trying to sell him a surge protector, especially one that is as overpriced as that.
Yes. Audio Quest, just for those of you that aren't in the know, is they sell power products in cables.
Cables.
And the cables are ridiculously overpriced and pointless, and in either are of no better value than something you could buy at Home Depot, or actively hurt the sound as they
attenuated in some way, which is all a wire could possibly do. I mean, if you really just want to have the peace of mind of having some kind of surge protector, I agree you want one that doesn't choke the current when you're plugging a pretty high-powered subwoofer or AV receiver into it. But I would point you to APC for sure, and I would point you to the P8V as a very reasonably priced surge protector that does not choke the current whatsoever. I use it on my own subwoofers, so I certainly stand behind it.
You towards just plugging it right back into the wall.
Plugging it straight back into the wall.
Because everybody else is shut up.
Probably
because
fine.
That if you call Paradigm and you ask them what they think you should do, they're going to tell you to plug it into the wall.
Yeah, because definitely that it does have a fuse and it would have blown if it were a surge. So, like I said, I suspect since you had corrosion on a wire inside of a speaker, I think you had some corrosion on that wire inside of your sub. That is the only reasonable explanation I can come up with for that being the thing that failed before anything else.
And I'm wondering if he just happens to live in a house with high humidity or something like that.
Or had it in storage at some point and something was dripping on it. I mean, it can happen.
Yeah. It can happen, or I mean, just bad luck.
Yep.
I mean, it could just be bad luck. So I mean, I wouldn't read too much into it, but I definitely don't think you need to go to Audio Quest and buy anything.
Don't do that.
So his room is small. It's 12 by 10 by 8, and the walls are concrete and the floor is tile. But he's put in carpet, and he's got a heavy drape on his left side and a bookcase on his right side within an open closet space. He doesn't perceive any echo, and his bass sounds even across his love seat. He sees a dip around 60 hertz if he measures, but he doesn't actually hear it if he plays sweeps and just listens. So none of the speakers in the sub are all working properly again. Should he even be considering an upgrade? Should he put any funds he would have spent on new speakers towards a second sub or absorption panels? He really isn't noticing anything lacking in his setup anymore, but he can't help daydreaming about new speakers regardless. So what do we think he should do? I think you got fine speakers.
Paradigm Monitor series speakers. I mean, is there such a thing as an upgrade to those speakers? Yeah. Yes. But it ain't cheap. You've got darn good speakers.
Yeah, I've got no problem with your speakers. But when people tell me, my bass is even across all my seats, I can, I've listened to sweeps and I can tell that's even across all my seats. I've got no absorption panels. I've got a carpet, but it sounds good to me. My instinct is to tell you right now, if it sounds good to you, you should just stick with it. But the reality is, you don't know what it sounds like. You don't. I mean, it's like saying, to a person who's always had, a certain amount of hearing loss, they're like, well, I don't really, it sounds fine. Everything sounds normal to me. Well, it sounds normal to you, but that's what you're used to hearing. So if we could fix your hearing, would it sound different? Yes, it would. And if we could fix this room, would it sound different? Yes, it would.
Yeah, I mean, if this were my room, whatever funds you have at the moment, I mean, given that he essentially has one seat in here, if we're being realistic.
Yes. It's not just essentially. It is a chair.
Yeah.
There is one chair in this room.
It's a little wide for perhaps just one person sitting right in the middle of it. So, yeah, you can call it a love seat.
Else in there.
But, given that, there is no reason why a single subwoofer in this setup couldn't be perfectly good. So that's not making me say, oh, you must get 2 subwoofers, because you don't have a large seating area.
I don't think so either. Yeah.
But if this were my room, I would absolutely expect to have some acoustic treatment in here.
Yes.
Now, it's good that you have essentially what is diffusion with that bookcase on your right side. The curtain on your left, I don't consider that heavy enough to be really doing anything acoustically, maybe the very highest frequencies. But if you want to just keep a curtain there, get maybe about 5 more of those so that you can bunch them all up together and have a very heavily pleated and truly heavy drape. But the other thing would be
and then watch your curtain rod just bow.
Yeah, the other thing would just be a freestanding panel of some sort at your first reflection point, which you could hide behind the curtain if you don't want to see it visually. But certainly, like your front corners, I mean, he's got some stuff in his corners, but above that, right, the front corner section going up to the ceiling, you could have some panels straddling there.
It just looks like a CD case or a DVD case. He can move that.
It could be moved, but he could also just, straddle something up a bit higher to have some bass trapping in there. Front walls, back wall in particular, I would definitely be putting some panels there if this were my room. And those rear corners too. Again, maybe.
Well, I mean, this is a tile floor, concrete wall.
Hard.
He's got a rug.
Walls. Yeah.
He's got a rug. I mean, he said he's got carpet.
I mean, the thing is, he's sitting so close to all of his speakers that I'm not shocked that he's getting a higher percentage of direct sound to reflected sound. But I mean, like I said, if this were my room, I'd be spending some money on some acoustic treatments.
So what I would do if I were you, if it were me, if this was my room, I would catch the first reflection points with either freestanding panels or something on the wall. I would put a absorption behind the front speakers, because you can.
Yep.
Right to the left and right of your display. I would put a absorption behind your seat as much as you can, which would be where that door is.
It could be mounted right on the door. There's not much reason why it can't.
You could mount it on the door, and that would 2 panels or something back there, and then maybe a panel on the side walls wherever you can fit it.
Yeah. And all the corners. All the corners.
And then as much as I could in the corners. Yeah. And then, so this is the thing. At this point, you may have enough absorption there. You're suddenly saying, wait a second, now my bass sounds weird. It used to sound pretty good, but now it sounds weird. That could very well happen. But, sir, this room is dedicated pretty much to playing video games, guitar, and movies.
Sure looks like.
Tell. Okay, so there is a driving chair setup thingy that you use for your driving games, which is great and fantastic, and I'm a little jealous of that, to be honest with you. And which tells me that you can put that subwoofer anywhere you want in this room. So once you get all this absorption put up, these corner traps, tri-traps from Gick or whatever, once you get this all set up, then we're going to do the bass, the subwoofer crawl again. We're going to figure out where it sounds best, in your room again, and then that's where you're going to put it.
Yep.
So
good stuff.
So when he went looking for acoustic panels sold locally in Puerto Rico, he found Vicoustic. Do we know anything about them? Nope. Never heard of them.
Not familiar with them. I looked at their products. They are perfectly reasonable. It's rock wool with wood frames, and they tend to put wood panels across the front to act as like a combo of diffusion and absorption. That's what a lot of their products are. Perfectly reasonable designs. It looks like the type that might not be cheap. Like, they look quite nice, but a lot of those that are designed that way, they charge a pretty penny. I don't know what the prices are like for you. If they're completely reasonable, there's nothing about the design of the panel that makes me say it's a bad design. It's purely about how much they're charging.
You also live in Puerto Rico, which is not so far removed from, the United States or any place else in the world that you can't get rock wool or the stuff and do it yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
This is quite literally the easiest DIY project that you can come up with. So if you can't get Gick, or this place is too expensive, or everything else is too expensive, just call local installation places. and just say, hey, I need some, 2 foot by 4 foot by 4 inch thick panel, rock wool panels, or whatever the
or fiberglass.
Owens Corning,
Yeah,
the Owens Corning, but
fiberglass.
Is that 404?
703 or 705.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So get those, and you just say, where can I get those? Oh, you can buy them from us or get them from the supplier. And the supplier will sell it to you in a box of however many. And then one box will be enough to do your entire room. Unless you do corner traps too, in which case you'll need more boxes. All right, Kev on Facebook. Kev wants further clarification about how the auto setup on his Sony receiver works. I thought we said we didn't know.
Well, I've looked into it.
All right.
It perked my
After having
interest.
run it, he looks at the results or goes into the settings. There are 3 microphone positions, but they are shown one at a time. So what's going on there? You can also select from flat, engineer, front reference, and off for the target curve after having run the auto setup. So what's that all about? I'm sure we answered that one last time. And how important is it for him to use a tripod with the included stereo microphone? I mean, okay, let's do a couple things first. I haven't looked at these graphs, so I'm not going to answer that.
Well, yeah, you don't really need to, honestly.
Yeah, the flat, engineer, front reference, off. So flat is flat.
Mm-hmm.
Front reference is trying to make your all your other speakers sound like your front speakers.
Uh-huh.
And engineer has got to be, God, I hope it's not just some engineer made a curve and you go with that one. But it's probably
that's kind of what it is. It's Sony's special sauce where they're like, this is what we measured in our studio, and now we're trying to make your room sound like our studio. So I mean, it's different target curves. Just like Odyssey, after you have measured, you can set that to flat or Odyssey reference, sometimes called music mode and movie mode, respectively, depending on the model year. They also have a match front, left, right type of thing. So very similar there, including off is one of the options. But I mean, I want to touch upon this microphone setup because he sent a picture of what he did, and yeah, that's not going to work. Piling them all on top of a bunch of pillows.
So the microphone setup. One of the things that if you've ever had a SPL meter like an RCA, not RCA, Radio Shack one, and use this, if you've ever used one before, you know that having something close to it makes a big difference in how it measures.
Yeah.
And I figured this out the hard way when I was doing my room and I was sitting in the seat next to the seat I was trying to measure. This was before we had auto room calibration. This was a long time ago. And I held the SPL meter out, the microphone pointing up the way you're supposed to, right about where my head would be, like you're supposed to. And I was looking at the measurement and I got it to 70, whatever it was supposed to be. And then I pulled my hand in so I could do something else. And as I came towards me, I saw the needle start moving around.
Changing.
And that boundary reinforcement, that having something else nearby makes a big difference. So how important is it for you to have a tripod? Well, it's important that you don't have anything else nearby that's not supposed to be there. You need to have as much air as possible. So what he's done is he's stacked up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pillows and then put this on the top of the pillow. Mm-hmm. Well, this kind of acts like your arm, your body being in the way, and it will affect the measurement that you get.
Yeah. I recommend a tripod with a boom arm, because then you can really get the microphone quite far away from even the vertical stick part of the tripod. Plus, it just makes it easier to move the mic around if and when you want to. So, yeah, I would I mean, they're not expensive. You can, at any music shop, there are cheap microphone stands with a boom arm that will do the trick for you. Now, this whole Sony auto setup thing, a little bit different from a lot of the others because it is a stereo mic that they provide. It's not a single point microphone. It's a stereo microphone. It is a little weird. And even though in the model that he has, they allow you to take 3 separate measurements, it's one at a time and you select which of those 3 positions you end up using. So this is the kind of thing where they're like, you have 3 different seats that you sit in on a regular basis, choose which one. It's pretty misguided. It's really
So it's not 3 different measurements from 3 different seats
that get averaged together,
and they get averaged together. It's you can choose which measurement we're going to use to auto calibrate.
That's right. It's like 3 separate presets type of thing. You could think like 3 memories, I guess you could think of it as.
Sure.
So I mean, okay, with what he is showing here, there's a dip that it tried to fill in and a little bit of a hump that it tried to curtail. I mean, but that was in position 2. Who knows which of the 3 positions that might not be a central seat. Plus, he had his microphone set up on top of pillows. And then the EQ off. I mean, that's something you can change afterwards. So I wouldn't be a huge fan of this system. I probably wouldn't rely very heavily on whatever EQ it comes up with on the automatic basis. It should still be able to nail the distances and trim levels just fine. But ultimately, I wouldn't be putting a huge amount of stock into its automated EQ that it generates. Plus, from position to position, it's just
getting a just regular tripod, I think.
Yeah.
Would be
it'll be a help.
I have more of a problem recommending to people that they buy a microphone stand with a boom arm and stuff like that, but buying a normal tripod, that's what I use. I'm comfortable with that. It's something that you at least have the possibility in the future of using.
Absolutely.
Whereas without a microphone stand with a boom arm is something that you're going to use.
You could take the boom arm off and then it's just a tripod. Or you can buy a tripod and add a boom arm to it later. Yeah, either way.
He says there's also a manual EQ section, but doesn't seem to import the auto EQ for adjustment. It just shows bass and treble. What's going on there? Well, it's not going to import that stuff. This is depending on how it works. There's 2 different ways it can work. It can take you say, okay, use the auto calibration thing you did, but I want to modify it in this way,
which is what Onkyo lets you do.
Yeah, which is what Onkyo lets you do. Or you can either use the auto EQ or you can manually adjust it. We don't do both.
Or you could have what this is, which is usually called a tone control, because that's all this is. They've labeled it as manual EQ. It's not. It's what every other AV receiver would call its tone control, because it is just bass and treble. You don't get to select what frequency it affects. You can just boost or cut the bass and the treble, and that's what everybody else calls a tone control. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah. So Kevin joins owning a physical disc of any movies he feels he might like to watch again at some point. So in that sense, he considers himself a Blu-ray collector. All right. Never thought of it that way. I just sort of think of it as somebody who buys movies. He doesn't own a 4K TV yet. He doesn't have a 3D display, which is okay. Nobody else does either. But both of these things are on the table. So do we think it would be wise to purchase? Well, good luck finding a 3D display.
Well, he was saying projector. He might get a projector. Projectors still do 3D, and he's thinking about it.
So do we think it would be wise to purchase the 4K version or 3D version for his collection right now? Whenever he's buying a movie, he tends to go for deals and second hands. So it's not too expensive, but he also often only gets 1 disc, even if the original retail package or 2 had 2 or more discs in it. Like 4K retail discs include the regular Blu-ray as well as the rest of the stuff. So buying secondhand might only be the 4K disc by itself. Same thing for secondhand 3D. So what do we think? Okay, let me tell you what I think. I started buying 4K discs because I want the upgraded sound, which now they're mostly including on 4K. And someday I will probably end up with a 4K projector or display.
I mean, the next time you buy a display, it's almost certainly going to be a 4K one because you won't have a choice.
So, but does 1080p look good on 4K? It absolutely looks great. I mean, it doesn't have the HDR, and it doesn't have sometimes it doesn't have the Atmos, but it's fine. The image is not like VHS to high def.
Right.
It's not like going to get blurry on you and look garbo. So if you are doing this, first of all, if you're going to buy 4K, you have to have the player, which he hasn't said he has one, which I assume that he understands that he will need to have the player. But the player will be able to send usually 1080p as well to whatever he's using or standard definition or regular color to
standard dynamic range.
Yeah, SDR. So if that's the case, but for me, I started buying it because I know that someday I will be having a 4K display anyways. But honestly, I mean, I'm telling you, no one knows about this stuff. This podcast, I mean, I've asked many people if they know when the Ultra HD Blu-ray is, and they do not. They don't know what it is. They may be buying it, and they may plug it in and go, this disc doesn't work. And they're like, well, try the other one. And they put the other disc in. They're like, okay. And that's how you're going to get your 4K disc for cheap
I mean,
at the flea market.
if you are getting retail or it's secondhand, but it includes everything that the retail disc did, so you're getting a 4K one that has the regular Blu-ray in there. You're buying the 3D version. It also has the regular 2D Blu-ray in there. I mean, there's not much reason not to. I mean, as long as it's not costing you well more than just the, regular 2D Blu-ray release. If you're fine with paying however little bit much extra it is, there's no real downside if you're still getting the regular Blu-ray anyway. I mean, the 4K one seems like a very safe bet to me. Because at some point, if you're planning on getting a 4K display anyway, why continue to purchase only regular Blu-rays when the 4K version exists and then you've got it and it's there and waiting for you? The 3D one, if you've gone without 3D until now, I mean, I'm the last 3D, evangelist left on this planet, so this is coming from me, and even I'm telling you, like, I probably wouldn't go to any great effort to build a 3D library at this point.
I think the best way to buy a 3D to decide to go into 3D when you haven't been into 3D is to find somebody who has given up on 3D
and they're
get
selling
all
a
their
big
discs.
collection. Yep, that would make sense.
If you found that, then come back to us.
Yeah.
But I trying to find a new release 3D right now is like...
That would also be after you have bought a 3D projector, tried a couple, and really loved it, and then you find someone who's selling off their whole 3D collection. That's a lot of caveats before I'm going to tell you to start picking up 3D discs. But the 4K one makes a lot of sense.
All right, Mark. Okay, before we go on. So 3D. My kids the other day, and this was a while ago, but... they, I was testing on the 3D projector. We watched a 3D movie in here. And then, like, sometime later, they went back and watched Spy Kids 3D with, like, the blue and the red thing.
Yep.
And they thought that the Spy Kids was better. That it was, I'm like, okay.
They thought the 3D improved the movie?
No, they thought that the 3D was better on the Spy Kids blue and red one than it was on the polarized glasses or whatever it was. I mean, it was just...
if the full 3D version was doing some crosstalk,
maybe
just using the anaglyph with the red and blue, you'll never get the crosstalk. So,
all right, Mark. About a year ago, Mark asked if using a mini DSP might allow him to improve his bass response beyond what Odyssey Multi-Q XC32 and sub EQHD was already doing. His room was roughly 15 by 15, but it's not a perfect square as his 5 by 5 closet in the rear left corner is always open. He has installed 7 absorption panels, but they are all only 2 inches thick. 3 of those panels are straddling corners, but the 4th corner is the closet, so there's no panel there. 2 panels go across the bottom of his front wall, so they're not angled, they're just flat. And the last 2 panels are on his side walls, pretty much directly to the sides of his 3-seat couch. He's got dual SBS SB sealed box 2000 subs, one in the front left corner and one in the rear right. So he's got panels across the corners, and of 3 of the corners, he's got panels on the side walls. He's got a computer on the back. He's got an open closet back there, whatever.
Yep.
A year ago, he said he was mostly happy with his bass and the automatic results provided by Multi-Q XC32 and sub EQHD, but after hearing about mono sub signals versus time alignment, the multi-sub optimizer software, and the mini DSP, he wanted to know if he could further optimize his bass. We said we need to see some measurements to figure that out, and now a year later, using a calibrated U-Mic 1 from Cross Spectrum Labs, go Herb, and Room EQ Wizard, he's got some. So he's sent us some stuff. We have the MLP EQ off and the MLP left seat EQ on.
The main listening position. Yep. Okay. And then going through them. So, I mean, the main listening position, if we just start, this is without Odyssey active, so he's turned it off. And this is what his 2 diagonally corner-placed subs are just producing. I mean, while it's a squiggly line, mostly going to the sort of... darker line on the right-hand side there is 100 hertz, so we're mostly looking below that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Even though it looks like kind of a squiggly line, honestly, if you look at the scale, this is basically plus or minus 5 dB. If 90 dB is the average, well, basically the biggest peaks here are going up to 95, and the lowest troughs are going down to 85 in the section that we're worried about at 80 hertz and below.
Literally cannot read this. It's so
it's a little bit small,
slight.
yeah. But yeah. In any case, that's what's going on without the EQ on. Now, certainly I was saying, take measurements in all three of his seats so that we're getting an idea of the seat-to-seat variation. So in the next graph that we have, we're looking at the main listing position compared to the left seat, and this is with the equalization off. This is just the inherent what's going on before any EQ is applied.
With the subs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in that left seat, we're seeing much worse response where he's got a pretty big dip down at about 40 hertz and another very big dip at 80 hertz. That's looking pretty much like a null there. But interestingly, the overall shapes of the graphs in terms of where they go up and where they go down is about the same. It's just that the left seat is going further up and further down in the sections where that's happening, but the overall shape is actually kind of similar. Now, if we look at the main listening position compared to the right seat, they're actually not very dissimilar, except for a little section between 45 and 55 hertz, where in the main...
They go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, in the main listening position, it's a bit of a hump, but in the right seat, it's a bit of a dip. So that's going to be tough to equalize, because if you
if you look at 45 to 55 hertz on all of his seats,
yes,
it's all pretty good.
It's pretty good. I mean, one is like 5 dB quieter, the other one is 5 dB louder than
but not huge.
The medium. But it's not that bad. So I mean, other than the 40 hertz trough and the 80 hertz trough in that left seat, the rest of it is fairly equalizable, which is why when we see the main listening position with Odyssey turned on, and this is just what Odyssey Multi-EQ XT32 with sub-EQ HT, so this was setting independent trim levels and distances for his two subs. It automatically set independent trim and distances, but then EQ'd them together as one, and the main listening position result is pretty darn good. It tried to boost up that trough at 40 hertz a little bit, but other than that, this is basically plus or minus 3 dB.
Yeah,
is more or less what's happened at the main listening position, which would explain why he said, when he was listening, probably mostly in his main listening position, he's been pretty happy with the results so far, and you ought to be. That's a pretty flat line.
Right.
Yeah. So going on now, we're going to compare, with the EQ on, what's happening at the other seats. So if we compare the main listening position on versus off, we're seeing that, it flattened it out exactly as we hoped it would. Then if we see the left seat on versus the left seat off, well, it actually helped in some of the worst trough areas, but didn't seem to do a tremendous amount of difference to just the left seat. And similarly in the right seat, it actually kind of made the right seat a little bit worse because there were some sections where it's trying to compensate for those troughs, and it actually kind of make the right seat a little bit worse in that instance. So if we're looking at the main listening position compared to the other two seats, all seats with the EQ turned on, are these perfectly overlapping lines? No. But is the overall shape in all seats fairly similar? Yeah, and we've managed to get the main listening position to like plus or minus 3 dB, and then the other positions are a little bit worse.
If you look at it from, what is this? I wish I could see these numbers.
Yeah, the very bottom is down at 15 hertz.
Yeah, 40 hertz on down.
Yeah.
It's like all within about at the most 5 dB, but most of it within 2 dB of itself.
Yeah, all three
all
seats
the way down. All those really
EQ
low
on.
notes.
Yeah, that's
really nice.
That lowest octave, 20 hertz to 40 hertz, really quite nice. Is that right seat not the greatest at 55 hertz? Yeah, that's the case, unfortunately. But that's kind of what happens there. So
he basically has a square room. 15
that's
by
right.
15. This is like, if his ceiling was 15 feet high, this would be the worst possible shape he could possibly have.
Yeah.
It just reinforces everything. So this is in a very non-optimal room as far as if you're by going in square sealed rooms or rectangular, sealed rooms. This is about as non-optimal as you can get, and it still did a pretty good job, even without even without the EQ. So the question then becomes, I mean, maybe he asks this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But
down below there. Yep.
yeah, let's go. So now that we can see what's happening across the 3 seats, what's our recommendation? Just stick with the multi-queue, or get a mini DSP, dig into the multi-sub optimizer software, multi-queue sub, whatever it is, or something else. I say leave it alone.
I mean, you could, because the results really, I mean, so people get thrown by these graphs, right? Because it looks a lot, to our eye, it looks worse, but you have to take a step back and examine, okay, what is it actually showing? And like Tom pointed out, between 40 and 20 hertz, you're talking like plus minus 3, at worst 5 dB. And that's from seat to seat. You know, in the main listening position, it's actually really good. The main listening position has become very good across the entire 20 to 80 hertz range that we truly care about. And the other seats have been improved versus no EQ whatsoever. And if you're looking for perfectly overlapping ruler flat lines, no, you're not going to get that with two subs in a square room, no matter what you do.
So remember the sub placement, and we said this many times, but it remains to be seen because or repeated here, because you can actually see it on these graphs. The sub placement across the room from each other is not meant to get a flat response from your subs. It's to make it so that every seat has as similar a bass response as possible.
Yeah, what we're looking for
is, as we see between 45 and 55 hertz, is when we have the measurements doing completely opposite things.
Right.
What does Odyssey do? Very little.
Yeah.
It can't do that much because you can't do one without, we can't fix one seat without harming another. So it says, well, hands off of this one.
Yeah, if it tries to boost the one seat that is dipping, or tries to cut the two seats that are going up, then it's automatically going to make the other ones that are the opposite worse. So what we're hoping to do with dual subs across the room from each other is have all the seats going up and all the seats going down at the same times, not necessarily the same amounts, and certainly not a flat line yet, but we're hoping to see generally up and generally down. And for the most part, you got that except for one section. And then when the EQ has been applied, we get, a fairly decent response even across all three seats, and a very good response at the main listening position. So you could leave this alone. It's really not something that you have to dig into because you are not getting bad response across all three seats. Could it potentially be further improved? There is such a thing, but
I don't know that any of us in this conversation have the tools to do it.
Well, I mean, where I would say, if you're willing to spend some time, and not any money, just some time, is using the automatic sub EQHT, where it's doing the independent trim levels and independent distances in particular. The trim levels you probably want independent because you do want to level match the two subs. But also in this room, how great are the distance differences going to be? Right, it's essentially between a square room.
Subs, it's between the two subs. It's going to be a couple of feet.
I'm betting it didn't set wildly different distances. Now, if it did, because I mean, sometimes it can. If it did set wildly different distances, the only thing I might suggest to you is to refer to my 12-step guide to setting up dual subs, so that these are SVS subs. They have fully variable phase knobs. You could manually attempt to adjust the phase knob on whichever one of them is physically closest to you. It looks like it would be the one in your rear right corner. And instead of using sub EQHT, you would tell your Denon that you only have one sub, so that it's sending out the exact same signal to both subwoofers. And then you would, on the subwoofer itself, manually change the phase knob and manually change the volume knobs to have the level matching. Follow the 12-step guide that I printed up on avrant.com. But that's about it, because that should potentially get you a little bit better uniformity before the equalization is applied.
I think it would be. I mean, I think that any differences he saw, I think any differences he saw in his measurements would be measurement differences based on placement.
Right.
Stuff and
but
other
possibly,
factors far before that.
Possibly you could get a little bit better uniformity, and then because you now have even better uniformity before the EQ is applied, now when you run it, and the EQ is applied, you should get even better linearity on all 3 seats, not just the main listening position. But I don't think, based on these measurements that we've seen, that you need to go buying any more equipment, that a mini DSP is going to be of any benefit to you. And with only 2 subs, what multi-sub optimizer software could do with only 2 subs is kind of minimal. It's not going to be any better than what you could do manually. So maybe invest some time, but not any money.
He is considering making floor-to-ceiling super chunk bass traps in the 3 corners where they could go. First and foremost, would these help? And second, what type of insulation should he use to make them? Pink stuff, rock wool, or stiff fiberglass like Owens Corning 703? The second two. So Rockwool or the Owens Corning.
It's just, if you're making super chunks, it's just easier to go with something that has a little more like physical rigidity to it. Is all we're talking about.
Basically, you get the 2 by 4 foot panels of whatever thickness. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
And then you chop them in half, and then you take those halves and you chop them into
triangles.
Triangles, and you stack them up. So it makes it very easy to do it that way.
It does. I'd probably go with the Rockwool because it's a little less expensive than the Owens Corning and works just as well.
Would it make a difference? Yes, it would. I don't know what, I can't tell you what difference that would be and whether or not it would be good or bad.
Right. Well, it'd be
it would do something
80,
in the lowest space.
80 hertz region, maybe if you're lucky down to 70, 75 hertz. Are you seeing a big problem there? I mean, in these graphs, you've got one seat where it's not tremendous at 80 hertz. It's still got a bit of that null. It might help you a little bit there, but not a tremendous amount, to be honest, because it's not doing anything lower than, 70 hertz if you're lucky. Should be doing something down to about 80 hertz. Now, you've got the region above 80 hertz, and that's going to be getting into where it's crossing over into your speakers. So would it potentially help some? Yeah. Would I expect a night and day difference? No. Yeah. But don't expect it to be helping in that 45 to 55 hertz region because it just isn't. It's not going to reach down that low.
I guess he could look into like contacting GIC and sending them the measurements and saying, is there a tune trap I can get for, around there? It
doesn't have any problems big enough for that to be needed, though.
I don't even know what they would say because it's with some of them, one of them going up and the other two going down, or vice versa. I can't remember which way it went. You can't help one without hurting the other. So you're kind of hosed on that one. So
the chunks could help you in that 80 hertz and in the speaker to subwoofer crossover region. So
okay. Chris on Twitter, let's say you're starting with good speakers and then you upgrade or at least change to different good or maybe even great speakers. If you're listening to the exact same content, the speakers are just supposed to be conduits faithfully reproducing the recorded signals, right? So why do people say, I'm hearing things I've never heard before? If you already had good speakers, what could possibly be so different? A lot.
There's quite a bit more than just raw frequency response.
Right. Yeah. There's, the transient response, how quickly how high and how low they play. That's just raw
I would consider
ability.
anything I would call a good speaker has to at least play all the sounds. So to me, that's a good speaker, can at least reach to the highs and the lows.
Not all of them play all the sounds with the same ability.
That's right. Yeah.
And then a lot of times I'm hearing things I've never heard before. Unfortunately, a lot of times that has to do with them, with what's between the ears than what's actually the ears themselves.
Very much so. The biggest variable of all, the human brain.
Yeah. They've listened to something in a way they haven't listened to, or they haven't listened to it in a long time this intently.
Or they've cranked the volume considerably higher than they typically listen at. Yeah.
But there are times where, I have been, actively reviewing a lot of speakers using the exact same content, and I'll go, I've never heard that before. I've never heard that little, weird chime or something, or this sound which was buried underneath other sounds. I've never heard it before. I'm hearing it now. That is sort of the things that they're talking about. But most of the time, when people are saying I'm hearing things I've never heard before, they are either being disingenuous to a certain extent, or like if it's an audiophile review, they always hear things they've never
Especially
heard
if this is more
anything.
expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, if it was more expensive, they've definitely never heard it before until just now.
Mhm.
It's an entirely new recording. Little did I know that this person was female. I thought this entire time they were male or something. It's
Uh-huh.
ridiculous, their reviews. But many times it's just we're paying more attention.
Yeah, I mean, all speakers distort the signal somewhat. There is no such
Right.
thing as a perfect speaker. So it is possible that one speaker to have better delineation, usually results to better transient response, or it can just have lower distortion. Harmonic distortion you're typically talking about there, but it can also be intermodulation distortion that can actually create, like, in the worst case scenario, audible beats to a sound where those
Right.
little beats were not in the recording. That's a tremendously bad intermodulation distortion, but it's possible. It can happen. So yeah, there can be things like that, distortion, transient response.
Yeah. So furthermore, he asks, if you run a good auto EQ or carefully manually EQ your system, shouldn't they all end up sounding exactly the same? How can speakers still have a signature sound or character after EQ has been applied? Okay. Let's just say, all things being equal, that every speaker on the market at a price point is going for the exact same, flat frequency response. That's not the case. Okay, that's not the
But
case.
let's just say
Many speakers are going for a curtailed frequency response, or there's so much variation in products and in parts and stuff like that that the sound ends up becoming. But let's just say you take 3 pairs of speakers that all cost $1,000 a pair. They're all going for a flat frequency response, and they all are of similar abilities. If you put them into a room and you EQ them so that they sound as good as they can sound, you still are dealing with the room. And in 3
sure.
different rooms, they're going to sound 3 different ways. Not maybe massively different, but each room is going to be different. If you put them all in the same room, all with the same, in the same room, in the same location, everything else, provided that there's not massive differences in how they're designed as far as like off-axis response and that sort of thing.
That's just it. Yeah, because
then they should, yes, in theory. Well, I mean, put it to you this way: you could take 3 different pairs of speakers from the same manufacturer, same line, everything, right? 3 different raw tweeter speakers from the Sierra 2, whatever they are, and 3 different pairs, and they should all sound identical. They should. They might not, but they should.
But I mean, he's saying you get 3 different speakers that, without any EQ applied, have 3 different frequency responses, but then you apply EQ to all of them. Shouldn't that equalization now make them all sound the same? But equalization is really only affecting frequency response, and primarily direct frequency response, the straight line from the speaker to your ear. And there are these differences in dispersion, off-axis response, total power response. You can have a speaker that on axis measures nice and linearly, or after EQ measures nice and linearly. But what if it's a electrostatic speaker that's firing way more sound out of its back than a traditional box speaker that's only firing out of its front? The total sound that then reaches your ear can be significantly different. So the differences in dispersion, total power output, off-axis, the polar response, and those can still have a very audible difference that equalization will not be able to fix.
Right. And so, I mean, there's just so many variables in there. And I mean, it's like those speakers, like Atlantic Technology, I think Vance Dickinson, whatever his name was, it designed those, if I remember correctly. And they had this amazing off-axis response. Like they were, if you point them directly at you, they sounded exactly the same as if you point them directly forward, which means that if you sat that far to the side of them, they sounded exactly the same, which means they're firing into the wall the exact same thing that you're hearing at your seat. So is that good? The speaker designer thought so. That's what they thought. That's why they designed them that way. Does it work well in your room? I don't know. He doesn't know either. But that's the way those speakers are designed. So when you are buying these speakers, there's all these other design considerations that go in there that will affect it, and you can't EQ all of that.
Yeah, you certainly can't just look at there's a lot of reviews where all they show you is one frequency response graph, which is like one microphone from one position looking at one aspect of the speaker performance. And you can't just say, well, if I can make that line look the same across 4 different speaker models, they should all sound identical. No, there are far more variables at play than just that one facet.
Right. It's like looking at one aspect of a person and saying, oh, well, their hair color is exactly the same as this other person's hair color. These people must look the same.
Yep.
Well, no, they don't.
There are other things.
You may actually look at their hair and go, okay, well, this person has really super curly hair and this person's got really straight hair. They're obviously totally different. But you're like, no, they're exactly the same. They've got the, no, that's just one aspect of it. It's like, I got them.
The bug from last week has been caught a week later.
No, it's not the same bug. I had the pest control company come out and try to help us. We're having, I think it's the dog. We left the door open trying to get the dog in and out, and that we have been invaded. Clara says, first up, she went to CEDIA. And she's happy to report that things have changed since the last time I was there in person. There wasn't a single booth babe. Liar. I don't believe it. Clara, I'm so happy,
things have
though.
changed.
I'll be honest with you. That was like my least favorite part of CEDIA. And the Sony reps were some of the nicest and best informed that she talked to. That I really don't believe. But let's go on. There's also a Trinov demo where they were showing off DTS X Pro and they were using triad speakers. Clara thinks it was the best sound. There's another bug in here. Just flew by. He was like, where's my friend? He's dead. Clara thinks it was the best sounding demo she heard. On the other hand, she knows how good JBL synthesis speakers can sound, but she was disappointed by that particular demo. So it just goes to show how good components aren't enough all on their own. You need the setup and the acoustics go along with them. And judging by things at a trade show demo certainly doesn't tell the whole story. The trades, I know. And that's why the Snoy thing, I always talk about. I'm like, it's non-optimal room, non-optimal space. They're trying to make you hear sound over the din of what's going on outside these like makeshift rooms that they have assembled in the middle of a floor or whatever. But and so I always give that caveat to that, but it still irritates me that they weren't able to do a good job. And yeah, JBL synthesis speakers, I mean, yeah. So anyways, her questions are, or question, like it looks like, both the Trinov and JBL synthesis demos used 4 subs, one in each corner, but in both cases, they were using larger subs in the 2 front corners and smaller subs in the 2 rear corners, of 15 inches up front and 12 at the back. She asked about it, and the response was given at the booths that the seating was closer to the back, so they're using higher output at the front and slightly lower output at the back. But we also talk about how the bass sound waves are so long that we were never hearing any direct sound, so only sound that is bounced around the room probably a few times. So shouldn't all 4 subs be the same size and output? Yes.
Well, there's that. However, we do level match subs.
We do, but okay. So I don't know if she was on the show floor. If she was on the show floor, they put up these makeshift walls.
Right.
That does not a room make.
No. Yeah, true enough.
So and as anybody who walked by that demo when it was going on will tell you, they could hear it just fine.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, putting higher output subs up front so that because it is essentially firing out into the convention floor.
Into the convention center, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense because you are getting quite a bit of direct sound from those subwoofers that in your room would not be the case. In your room, since you are not sitting in a makeshift, 4 walls in a really flimsy ceiling in the middle of a convention center, you should have 4 identical subs.
I mean,
yes.
I don't want to say they're entirely wrong because they aren't. We do level match subs, and so I mean the interesting thing is that the microphone or the SPL meter, it can respond to that very initial wave. That very official initial launch of the wave, which your ear can't perceive or our brain can't perceive. So that's the difference that's going on there. We don't perceive the sound until a couple of cycles of any given frequency have happened, but the microphone can respond to that very initial, push out, that wave front that comes out of it. So they're not entirely wrong. The response that they gave you is factual. But trying to do that in a non-conventional means that it is much easier to just have, the 4 identical subs.
You are not hitting the limits of your subs output by having the front subs being 2 extra feet away from you in a 20-foot long room.
Yeah.
It's just not the case.
Yeah.
But yes, so you're right. You're right. You should have 4 identical subs in your room. But in this case, it very well may be the case that they needed to have the larger subs just because for level matching purposes.
Also, their walls might be 200 feet away. You are not getting room gain anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Francis on Facebook. Francis is using an Epson TW6100 projector, which is a 1080p model, no HDR. He also has an LG OLED. He just bought a Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and he's hoping he'll be able to use it with both displays. How can he do that? Can he make 2 different player presets with individual settings for display? Can he leave Dolby Vision turned on? I don't know for sure, because what usually happens here is it detects the lowest common denominator, which would be your Epson projector, and it's like, oh, there's something in this chain that can only accept 1080p, therefore everything gets 1080p. So the options usually become either get like an HD Fury, which will allow you to do this very easily but very expensively, or manually switch outputs.
Yeah. I mean,
cables basically.
The question mark here. So let's just say you took an UB820, you left essentially everything at auto, set to auto.
Yeah.
Including Dolby Vision. Dolby Vision can be turned on, but you set it to auto. And then with everything set to auto, you connect it to a 1080p display. It'll work. It's not like it's going to say, oh, I'm set to auto and I'm a 4K player, so I have to output everything in 4K HDR. No, with everything set to auto and you connect it to a 1080p display, it'll work. And similarly, you connect it to your LG OLED with everything left in auto, and it will work. So he's like, what settings do I use for my Panasonic? You essentially leave everything at auto.
Right.
The one thing I would tell you is to not set the Dolby Vision output to player LED. Don't do that in your case, but that's not the first option anyway, and just setting it to on auto will get the job done. So that'll work. So the only question is, are you connecting your 2 displays to, say, the 2 HDMI outputs of an AV receiver? And it is one of the cases where even when your Epson projector is in standby, or vice versa, the Epson is on, but the LG OLED is in standby, that for some reason the Panasonic still detects that both displays are there.
Right.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the AV receiver. It depends on the projector.
And then we've talked about that HDMI switch. It's like a physical slider thing.
It's a physical piece of metal that turns when you click the button. Yeah.
So we would put that on the other side of a single output of your receiver.
Correct. Yeah.
And then before you turn on
the Panasonic
anything, you would flip the switch to the proper display.
Yes.
That's probably the cheapest way to do it.
That's probably the cheapest,
other than just physically unplugging one of the cables.
That's right.
As you're going.
Yeah. So that's the only question mark. You might be lucky and leaving everything plugged in works just fine, because sometimes it does. Some AV receivers, some projectors, when they're off, and it's not a problem at all. But if you get the case where if it's doing lowest common denominator, everything's going to be 1080p SDR. So if that's the case, and you only get 4K HDR when you physically unplug your Epson, then if you don't want to always have to unplug it when you're watching your OLED, you get the Sewell 1 in 2 out physical switch. You could get that.
Bobby, how much difference is there really between lossless formats like Dolby True HD or DTS HD Master Audio versus their lossy counterparts like Dolby Digital or DTS? Is it subtle, substantial? Could the way the soundtrack was mastered make a bigger difference than just the lossless versus lossy format? Would the way your room is set up and the equipment you are using make a big difference? Okay, well, these are all totally different questions. But so the difference between True HD and DTS Master Audio is there is a mixed difference usually. And then the difference is
Between those two, sure.
Between those two, there's a mix difference, and then a lot of times part of that mix difference is that DTS will have more bass, just in general, and that's true between Dolby Digital, the lossy version, and the DTS.
Now, there's no
version.
reason why that has to be the case. They are both capable of exactly the same thing. That is all decisions being made by the mixing and mastering engineers.
So, how much difference is there really in can this be attributed to mix more than not mix? The answer is it's more of if you think of it more of as a capabilities. Okay, Dolby True HD and DTS HD master audio, or the lossless formats, just has a bigger box in which to put all the sounds.
I mean, it's capable of giving you bit for bit exactly what came out of the studio master.
Right. So through the compression process, by what you take that master and you compress it down to DTS or Dolby Digital, can that sound just as good as or better maybe than they're lossless? Well, let's all look at Thor Ragnarok, because the lossless Atmos version was garbage. And it was because of the mix.
Yep.
There was nothing wrong with the container in which it was in. That container was perfectly capable of not being crap, but somebody decided, bass, who needs it?
Dynamics. We only want 6 decibels between the loudest and the quietest
thing. Haven't you heard
thing.
Oasis? They're the best band. So, yeah, I just hit the camera. So, yeah, saying inherently is one better or can be the mix, the answer is all of it's true. If you have a very poor acoustic space or really not very good speakers, then you're never going to hear. It doesn't make a difference if you listen to lossless or lossy versions. Right. No one cares.
But objectively, Dolby Digital and DTS are losing some of the original information. What went in from the original studio master is not exactly what comes back out the other end after it's been encoded and then decoded. Some information is lost. I mean, it's very much like MP3 versus the raw CD, right? The raw CD or the FLAC file.
Just as good? Yeah, it can.
It could. It's possible.
With careful mastering, with careful, encoding, with making sure that when you did the original mix, that you had in the back of your mind, you had a thought, this is going to be encoded. So if I want it to sound good encoded, I better make sure, or compressed, I better make sure I do these things. If you have an audio mixer who does all those things, you're going to come out saying, man, this sounds just about the same. This sounds great.
Yep. And just like listening to a well-encoded 256 kilobit per second MP3, it can be very difficult to tell that apart from the
And when you
lossless.
ask, can equipment make a difference? Well, I charge you with this. Take a CD, put it in your car, drive down the highway, listen to it, then take it home, put it in your home theater thing, set up, and listen to it. Does it sound different? Because that's the difference in equipment.
Change in environment.
I mean, that kind of change in environment can make a humongous difference in how something sounds. So Bobby is using an Marantz SR5012 with 5 Ascend HTM 200 SE speakers and a SVS PB 1000 in a small acoustically treated room. What differences should he listen for if he wants to compare lossless versus lossy? He's been watching a lot of old classics lately, and many of them include the original mono audio track or perhaps a 2.0 stereo track. Most often, it's encoded in DTS HD Master Audio, but if he's being honest, if he switches it to Dolby Digital 1 or 2.0 and A/B in comparison, he really doesn't think that he can tell a difference. So if he's assuming that with both a modern so if he's assuming that with a modern surround sound blockbuster, the differences would be more obvious, but is that really the case? And if so, what are the differences he should be hearing? I don't know that there's a hard and fast rule that we can give you. I mean, where I look for differences in compression is in the lowest bass and the highest sounds, the highest highs. Those are where I look for them. That's where they're most obvious. When the cymbals on a drum set sound like tink instead of having a nice ring to them, and the bass ends up sounding like distortion. It just sounds like, you know what I mean? It doesn't. It sounds. You recognize it as being something that should sound like a bass sound, and if you don't pay attention to it or you're driving around in the car, it sounds fine. But when you get it home and you listen to it, you go, that doesn't sound right. That's what I listen for.
Yeah,
in
I mean,
compression.
what compression is attempting to do is to throw out data that won't be missed.
You can't hear. Yeah.
That that's what it's attempting to do. So it tends to be the extremes of the frequency range, the highest highs, the lowest lows. That tends to be what goes first. It can also be sometimes detected in your ability to delineate some sounds.
Yeah.
Because in the full lossless, all of that audio object, if it is object-based audio, but all of that stem, that audio stem in the soundtrack is present, whereas if any of that sound is redundant with another sound, when you get to the compression engine, it'll throw out one of them and say, I don't need both of these here. But that continuous stem all throughout can sometimes help you follow a particular sound, delineate it from other things in the soundtrack. When you're listening to everything in just mono, probably is going to be pretty hard to pick out differences as long as the compression isn't egregious.
When we say that, and this is with like MP3s is what we're talking about with music. But when you go to movies, it's suddenly, it's the compression becomes different because it's, a scene might be nothing but an explosion.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's not going to take the lowest of the explosion out because you can't hear this anyways. It's going to look at that and say, we've got this many frequencies to deal with. What can't they hear? And it's going to start taking out stuff that it thinks that you can't hear. Well, that's going to change from scene to scene. So, and I honestly think like the lossy DTS in Dolby is generally speaking a pretty much a lot higher fidelity encoding than what you might expect from like a 128 or 93 MP3, where it's going to be a lot more obvious. There's also a lot more of the frequency response range being played during music, or can be played during music, which has got a whole lot more going on than most scenes of a movie. So what can you listen for? Well, you can listen for anything. I honestly don't think that this is a worthwhile way to spend your time. I mean, if you really want to hear differences between MP3s or in compression versus not compression, there was that like test thing that we did not so long ago, a couple of years back, right? Where they had like 3 or 4 different versions of the same music, and you're supposed to pick out which one was whatever. That would be what I think that was the
I know it was the Golden Ear Challenge. I think it was Philips that did that.
I'm putting it in. Golden
Ear.
It
was the Golden Ear Challenge. I mean, there's also Harman's How to Listen, but that was less about compression versus lossless. It was definitely the Golden Ear Challenge.
Yeah, I found it. So we'll put a link up for that. Do that, and don't bother.
Was it Philips?
It does say Philips on here.
Yeah, Philips Golden Ear Challenge. There you go. My memory's not too bad.
Here it is. I don't know if it's. What is this?
That's all right.
I don't know.
I know. Okay, I'll be able to find it.
We'll find it later. We'll try to find it. It might be gone. They may have deleted it. Derek just added some rear speakers to his setup. He's using an Onkyo receiver that says it can run Atmos. He's using an Xbox One as the source. If he puts a Blu-ray disc in his Xbox One, the audio system seems to play in 7.1 just fine. Sound is coming out of all of the speakers, including the rear speakers that he just installed. But if he switches over to the Plex app, no matter what setting he tries on his Xbox One, no sound seems to come out of his new rear speakers. He says he's tried all 3 bitstream options from the Xbox One setting, as well as the 7.1 uncompressed setting. Furthermore, if he uses the Voodoo app to stream content, again, he gets no sound coming out of his new rear speakers, even though some of the Voodoo content is listed as being 7.1. Can we please help?
So, I mean, I made sure to put rear in there because that is the word he used, and I am not sure, because a lot of people call the surround speakers their rear speakers. And I do not know if what Derek has added are the 4th and 5th speakers to, say, 2.1 or 3.1 up front, and he has now just added the 4th and 5th surround speakers, or if he has actually added surround back speakers, because he just used the word rear.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not sure. I don't know, because here's the thing. If what you have added, Derek, are the 4th and 5th speakers, the surround speakers, and then you tell your Xbox One to output 7.1, no sound will come out of your surround speakers, because what should come out of your surround speakers, the Xbox One still mixes it into the 6th and 7th surround back channels. And if you don't actually have surround back speakers, your surround speakers are going to be sitting there silent. And that might be what's going on here because he just used the word rear. Yeah.
Yeah. So the solution for this, unfortunately, is twofold. Live with it. I mean, I guess.
Wow. No, that's terrible. No.
But you could. What I did initially was to set everything to output 2.0.
Yup.
Stereo, and then use my Dolby Surround Up mixer or whatever it was.
Or Pro Logic if that's what you still have. Yep.
To mix it into different channels, and that works pretty well. He says with the disc, it works fine. Is that right?
That works fine, and that would make sense again if what he's added is actually surround speakers. Because
remember, in at the Xbox, there's sound settings. Not only there's sound settings for the box itself, which is for everything but the discs.
That's right.
And then there's disc settings, which are individual. So if you're actually trying to get Atmos out of the thing, you got to go into the disc settings for that part of it. And then there's also an Atmos setting for the fact that he's not talking about Atmos as being one of the options is a little strange. So you may be right. He may have gone from a stereo to a 5.1 setup.
Yeah, because I mean, using that word rear can mean a lot of things to different people.
Xbox One is, and this is something I've complained about endlessly on this podcast, is how it doesn't send out side surround information correctly, which is quite. I can't fathom why they haven't fixed this yet. And we've had Xbox insiders, and if you're one of our listeners who has told us that you've been on the Xbox whatever it is program and they're going to fix it, come at me, bro, because I don't see it.
I mean, unfortunately,
it's been years.
Yeah, I mean, so with the disc, it's working fine, and that makes sense because from the disc app, the Blu-ray app in the Xbox One, it does actually just output the bitstream. What was on the disc is what comes out of the player, and things are working fine. With everything else, what the Xbox unfortunately does is decodes it internally, no matter what. It decodes it internally.
Say 7.1 on your front display.
Sure.
I mean, what it will say.
But also, even if you tell it to output a bit stream, for everything other than discs, what it does first is whatever the source is, whether it's Plex or a streaming app, Amazon, Netflix, whatever, it decodes the audio inside of itself, and then it either outputs it as PCM, which is what it just decoded it into, and if it was a 5.1 soundtrack, it put the surround channels into the surround backs. And I'm suspecting you don't actually have surround backs, that you've just added surrounds.
It's really what it sounds like.
That's what it would explain it. But also, it will, if you say output a bit stream of Dolby Digital or output a bit stream of DTS, it will first decode whatever the audio was and re-encode it, still wrong.
Right.
So all of this makes sense.
Dolby Digital, all those things are a channel-based audio.
That's right.
Which means that each channel gets the information sent to it by the source or the whatever it's getting. But this time, the source is being decoded within the Xbox, and it even if it was already DTS, and you said send out DTS, it unencodes the DTS, re-encodes it as DTS, and then incorrectly with the surround information now in the surround back speakers. And if you had 7.1 or 7.2 speakers, it would still, you would get all the surround information out of your back speakers.
Out of your surround backs.
If nothing coming out of the surround speakers.
That's right. So that's why I really suspect the rear speakers you've added are actually surrounds, and then all of this adds up. So what could he do? You could set the Xbox to output either stereo and just rely on upmixing, or tell it to output uncompressed 5.1, not 7.1.
Right. That would be
that should work.
The problem with for the rest of us is if you tell it to send out uncompressed 5.1, it still won't work for the surround backs. It'll
if you have surround backs now, it doesn't work. But
now the surround backs don't work. So yay, Dan. I know that we're going to be going a little short this week, but it's 12:30 or whatever, 12:40, and I haven't eaten today.
We got to try to get to at least 12. Let's try.
I don't know. Let's try. Let's maybe consider 10 is going to be enough. Dan, first up, Dan says, thanks for keeping this podcast alive for so many years. You guys rock. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Dan basically wants us to try to and objectively sell the whole CD quality. And we've already done this. CD quality, 16-bit, 44.1 kilohertz versus higher than CD quality, 24-bit, 96 kilohertz or more thing. He knows he knows there are people who swear by high-res audio, and there are also people who dig their heels in saying CD quality is entirely good enough. But whenever this debate is had on forums and such, it seems to devolve into tribal shouting match. And for Dan, nothing is really resolved. Dan, I will resolve for you right now. Okay? Everything you can hear, every sound that can be made in nature by a thing, including a speaker or a computer, can be reproduced identically by a sound container within, or a sound contained within a CD quality 44 kilohertz 16-bit.
Right. That the human ear can hear.
Everything. Anything above or below, any container that's bigger than that is like taking your present and putting it in a bigger box to make it more difficult to unwrap. That is really all it is. That is objectively true.
That's the objective part of what the containers are capable of holding. You don't need a container any bigger than CD quality, but that doesn't mean that what you actually receive from something that you purchase or stream or download is maximizing what the CD container is capable of doing. So there are...
This question is really long. Let me finish reading it real quick so that we can go through it. But that is the objective answer. The objective answer is, people are like, oh, but this is better and this one's better and it has... No. Anything that is bigger than the CD quality container is just a bigger box containing the same information. It doesn't help the information have any more fidelity. It just makes it bigger. All right. So if 1644.1 is really as good as audio ever needs to be, why did audio companies even start making and releasing things like 2496 and higher? Money. When did Sony develop SACD?
Oh, I guess that should be why. Sorry.
Why did Sony develop SACDs if there's really truly no benefit whatsoever? And now that huge amounts of storage are cheap, why compress audio even a little bit? Isn't it best to have it as pure and as close to the studio master as possible? Do we turn our noses up at the claims of higher than CD quality just because it has become synonymous with being an audiophile format? Well, thanks for the little jab there. Whatever, dude. Come at me. Which itself is sort of thrown around as an insult by some people. What's the real deal without bringing emotion or ego into it? Well, you brought emotion into it. But the reality is, like I said, the reason why they came up with higher than CD quality, there was a reason for it, and it's on the mixing side. Okay, it's on the editing side.
It's actually on the capture side. The initial recording of it into a digital format side is where it can be beneficial in a very real way.
And Rob will go into all that. But in the end, all you can hear, everything that you can hear is within a 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz container. It can be contained within that. Now, if you take a terrible recording, a terrible mix, and you put it into that container, and then you take that file and you upmix it with using a computer to 2496 or whatever you want to change it into, 48 128 or whatever, whatever it is, you will still end up with a terrible recording.
Right.
It will sound exactly the same. It'll just be in a bigger box. It is the same terrible present given to you by the same terrible aunt. It is still terrible. But a well-recorded, well-mixed recording, well-mastered.
Properly mastered, properly encoded, yes.
Good, great dynamic range, careful attention to detail when they were capturing everything and encoding it. That's going to sound great, and it's not going to sound any better by having it in a bigger box.
Yeah, so the confusion, Dan, for you and everybody else who continues to debate this topic is the inability of many people to separate the container as what is this container capable of holding from the experience of I bought this thing and it sounds better, and attributing that to the container that it came in. versus what is actually sounding better here, because unquestionably there are 2496 or 36384 or whatever the numbers are, releases that do in fact sound better than the CD release. I do not dispute that whatsoever. There are SACD versions that are only in stereo. I mean, one of the reasons SACD and DVD audio came out was because they attempted multi-channel audio, which you can't do on a CD. CD is limited to 2 channels, so that's one part of it. But the higher sampling rate, higher bit depth side of things, like one of the reasons that is there is because they're attempting to sell some new format and they have to say this is better than CD quality, right?
The same reason why we're getting 8K right now, dude.
Sure.
The same reason we have 4K. No one needs 4K.
But
I've been saying it for how many years? It's not because I'm a videophile. It's not because I'm an audiophile. It's because you can't see the difference between it.
Right.
You're not sitting close enough. None of you are. And I'm not either.
Unquestionably, there are CD releases that are only in 2 channel that do sound better than the CD version. But unfortunately, people take that experience and attribute that better sound to it being this SACD format or it being 9624. And it's the inability of a lot of people to separate, why does this thing sound better?
And those same people are buying basically up converted CD
very often
that have been up converted to 9624 and sold online and touting how much better it sounds,
right.
Not because it sounds better, because they're listening more and because of what's between their ears. And you know what? It's psychology. It's fine, but it's just it's not physically different.
But it doesn't mean so here's the other side of it. You go out and buy 10 CDs, and then you go out and buy 10 versions of that same album, but on the FLAC release, the 9624 FLAC release, or the SACD version, or the DVD audio version, or whatever it is. And 8 out of those 10 releases sound better on the 9624 FLAC, or on the SACD, or on the DVD audio. And that is not in a technical way, not in an objective way, not in a what is capable way, but it is a real enough reason to say, well, if I'm gonna buy something, if I want the highest quality, maybe I'll go for the 2496 FLAC, because more often than not, they put a better master into the 2496 release. You have to be aware that if one of these things sounds better, it's because they are different masters, or something went wrong in the encoding process. There are cases where the CD sounds better than the SACD. There's rare.
The Metallica album where the Rock Band's release sounded better. The music had more dynamic range on Rock Band than it did on the CD.
Than it did on the CD.
On the CD release.
There is this inability of some people to separate what is the container capable of holding versus what do I get when I buy these things. And it's fair enough to say more often than not the 2496 kilohertz release sounds better, but that's because they released a different master in that format, which has more dynamic range, or whatever it is.
It's perfectly possible, and it's happened to me before, where I've reviewed SACDs that there was CD on one side and SACD on the other, and I listened to both sides. I'm like, they sound exactly the same. And then the comments come rolling in. How can I even trust this reviewer if he can't hear the difference between SACD and CD?
But they put the same master on both, and as a result, they sound exactly the same. So to put the thing to bed for you, Dan, CD 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz is capable of holding everything that your human ears can detect. There is no reason why we need any container larger than that, but it doesn't mean that the music labels are always putting their best into that container, and in fact, very, very often, they are not putting their best into that container. They are purposefully
not very often, but yeah.
Oh, very often. They are purposefully putting a dynamic range compressed, poorly encoded version into the CD release, and only reserving the good version for the 9624 FLAC or the SACD. There is no technical reason why they need to do that. There is a marketing and monetary reason for them to do that. So, yeah, I think that's that.
Secondly, on the video side, today's streaming looks pretty darn good, but it's not the exact same quality as what you would get on a physical Ultra HD Blu-ray disc. We've already clearly moved towards 8K and everything being HDR, but are we actually going to get this content in the best possible quality? It seems like all the talk is about better compression, but something gets lost the more you shrink down the video stream, right? So are we always going to be stuck with good enough, or will our ever-expanding David storage capabilities allow us to have maximum video quality? Well, we can have 4K video right now. And we've talked about this before. There's no talk. There's not even a hint of a talk about an 8K video format.
Disc, you mean physical disc.
Disc, yeah, physical disc. So, and the reality is, I don't know that we need to have anything better than 4K that's just up converted to 8K by the player or the because I mean, I don't know that it's going to have to be that much better. I don't even. I still am confused by what we're even going to do with 8K displays when there's no content for it other than the Olympics.
Well, I mean, we don't get any 1080p content, let alone 4K, let alone 8K content that isn't lossy video compression. We don't. Everything we get that's 1080p, for that matter, is data compressed and lossy.
Streamed.
Yeah, lossy. Well, I mean, our Blu-rays are lossy data compressed. It's not bit for bit the original raw video master that comes out of our Blu-ray. There is data loss going on with those. So, I mean, if you want to talk maximum video quality, that would be a raw video format where, every single subpixel gets its full 10 or 12 bits and there is no lossy data compression used whatsoever. That would be maximum video quality, and I can flatly tell you, no, we are never getting that, especially at 8K. But as the compression gets better, it requires more processing power to put back together the pieces, essentially,
right.
and that can
to decode it.
Yeah, to decode it. It requires more and more processing power as the data compression gets better and better. So, I mean, he's basically asking, when it comes to 8K, are we going to have something where we can say, okay, the streaming version of 4K right now is not quite as good as the physical disc version of 4K. I entirely believe at some point we will have streaming 4K that is every bit as good as current disc 4K, assuming there is not another disc format that goes even further. Not necessarily that we're going to get the same bit rates, but that we're going to start using an even better form of compression that allows us to send streaming 4K at lower bit rates that is, after it's decoded, every bit as good as what's on 4K discs right now. Will the same thing happen with 8K? I mean, I don't know if we're going to get an 8K disc format. I actually really, really doubt it. So I think when it comes to what is the best 8K you're going to be seeing, it's probably going to be whatever is on stream that is de facto the best 8K that we've got.
They might just change like 4K Ultra HD to just be Ultra HD, and that will be have 8K on it.
Yeah.
But
will that look as good as 8K could possibly look? No. It's going to be data compressed forever and ever from now on.
Right. Chad heard some demos recently where front wide speakers were being used. He was surprised by how much they added to the experience and how much he liked them. He's already got a 7.2.4 setup. What would he need to do in order to add front wide speakers? Does he need to look for a receiver that says it does 9.2.4? And do Atmos soundtracks natively support front wides? The last answer is no.
No, the last answer is yes. Yeah, Atmos soundtracks can support front wides.
Oh no, DTS doesn't. I thought it was DTS that did.
Yeah, so DTS X does not.
Right. But Neural X did.
Well, so it's really confusing. So DTS X tops out at a 7.2.4 configuration. That's what DTS X tops out at. Now, DTS X Pro is coming. And DTS X Pro will allow you to use more than 11 speakers and more than a 7.2.4 configuration. So DTS X Pro very well could support front wides. Actual Atmos can support front wides. It does so by having objects in the floor layer. And if a sound happens to have coordinates that line up with where front wide speakers should be, voila, you have a front wide signal. It's not a channel. It would only be if there's an object with coordinates that come out of where front wides ought to be. The Dolby Surround Up Mixer does not support front wides, but the DTS Neural X Up Mixer does. So it's the complete flip-flop there. If you're using the DTS...
Okay, that's what got me. I knew that the Atmos didn't support the front wides in the Up Mixer.
In the Up Mixer, yeah. The Dolby Surround Up Mixer doesn't support front wides at all. If you're using Dolby Surround Up Mixer, no sound will ever come out of your front wide speakers. But if you're using the DTS Neural X Up Mixer, sound can come out of your front wide speakers. And that is up mixing, so it doesn't have to actually be an object encoded to be there. It'll say, here's a sound that's partway between your front speaker and your surround speaker, so I'm going to put it into the front wide. So a weird flip-flop on those two things. Now, if you're buying today, you pretty much have to go for the Denon X8500H or the Marantz 8805.
The top of the line,
top of the line, the 13-channel ones. That would be in your mass market brands. There is also Emotiva's... XPR2 and RMC1 processors that can do 15 speakers plus a subwoofer channel. And there is Monoprice's supposedly soon to be released HTP1, which isn't out today as we're recording this, so we'll see if that actually hits the market. But that can also do 15 speakers, including front wides. Those are your options there. You could alternatively go back in time to old models that supported front wides. That would be the only other way to get them added to your system.
But they don't support overhead speakers, so.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So he's got a door on one of his side walls. It's 4.5 feet from his front wall. So if he installs front wide speakers, they'd either have to go in front of or behind that door position. Would that be too far forward or too far back? Front wide should go basically where your first reflection point, like in the line of the first reflection point.
Yeah.
It's sort of, if you think about it that way. So go along your wall, and then like with a mirror, and then sit, have somebody go, like in line with your front speakers, place the mirror on the wall, and then slide it across the wall towards the speaker as you sit in your main seat. And then when you can see the speaker, that's where it is.
Yeah.
So anywhere in that line towards you from the wall. So
right. Yeah. It doesn't have to be on the wall. It could be, in from the wall if need be.
Yeah, it could be. Or you could just put like a couple little pieces of tape on the ground and say, this is where the speaker's supposed to be. And then when the door is closed, you put it there. And when the door is open, you move it out of the way. Yeah, I mean,
the fact is, without knowing the full dimensions of your room and where your front speakers are in relation to where your main listening position is, I can't tell you for sure if where that door is exactly where your first reflection on that side wall would be. Unknown. But... yeah, so let's see, 4.5 feet from the front wall. I mean, if you've got
probably behind the door, I would think. It depends on where his speakers are, though. I mean, his room could be 22 feet long.
That's right. I mean, you might be sitting 15 feet away from your speakers, at which point, having the front wide speaker closer to you than the door would be totally fine. So it all depends on your room size, how far away you are from your front speakers, how far away you are from your side walls. But Tom is right. You find where the first reflection point would be. So on your left wall, where can you see? You're sitting in your main listening position. Somebody's holding a mirror on your left wall. Where can you see your front left speaker? Yeah. That's your first reflection point for that. On the other side, on the right wall, where can you see your front right speaker? And that's where your front wide should go.
So he's got a 75-inch Samsung 1080p TV. He keeps feeling like he should upgrade to 4K, but he really wants an even larger screen size, most likely 85 inches. He's been patiently waiting for prices to come down. But now it seems like HDMI 2.1 is just about ready. If he buys an 85-inch TV in the very near future, it would be like a 2019 or 2018 model, and none of them have HDMI 2.1. So should he continue to wait, he's not in any huge rush. I mean, if you're not in any huge rush, prices aren't going to get any higher. So,
yeah, that's true. I mean, with a 4K TV, you really don't need full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 unless you really think 4K at 120 hertz is going to be a thing. I mean, none of your video sources are going to be doing that, so it would strictly be a gaming possibility and probably only a PC gaming possibility at that. I don't really buy that. You know what? The PS5 and the Xbox, whatever Scarlet ends up being called, will probably have a 120 hertz output mode, but there's no way it's actually rendering 120 unique frames. There's no way those systems are going to be rendering 120. They'll be doing some frame doubling or something inside.
You'll know if they do because you'll hear the squeal of the fan as it's trying to cool the thing off.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't think you really need full bandwidth HDMI 2.1 for a 4K display. The only thing that might use that is 120 hertz. So even if you're a gamer and you want the variable refresh rate in that, you can get that already. You know, the Samsungs already have that. I mean, Samsung's kind of the only one who has that at that. You know, LG has it as well on their OLEDs, but they don't have an 85-inch one that you'd be able to afford. So, yeah. Are you a super duper gamer? I mean, ultimately, that's it. If you're not a super duper gamer, there's no real reason to wait.
Except for prices
to keep going down. Yeah.
Just keep my eye open for a deal.
Sure.
Like a good deal. A deal that you're like, this is too good to pass up. A deal that you think a year from now, the prices won't be lower than that. That sort of deal. All right, that's going to be it. What else we got, Rob?
We have a whole bunch. Adam M., Infinite Gary, of course, Andy M., Tom K., Damian D., Adam G., Andrew L., and Ted M., and Bastian from Germany.
All right. If you want to get your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. We want to thank our 88 patrons, including James from the UK, for supporting us on patreon.com, as well as Byron for talking us up to SVS and KEF, and David and Francis for reminding me to double check the audio this week.
That's right. Byron, congrats on those purchases. Thanks for talking us up to SVS and KEF. David and Francis, thanks for the heads up there. And patreon.com/AVRant Podcast if you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 88 patrons, including James. Hope you're doing well in the UK over there.
Yep. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.